we've had some improvements in Hendersonville and some real accomplishments in the past 4 years. We've increased the road budget by 10 times. Before I came into office, we had budgets of $200,000. Recently, I had a budget a couple years ago of $2 million. We have addressed 70 flooding projects. Those are projects that affect people's lives. Very happy to have finished those. We've also increased our local sales tax by 20%. That's increasing the economy of Hendersonville by 20%. Pretty phenomenal when it comes to that. And we've seen businesses invest locally. They've invested locally. They've added $130 million investment in 4 years. And that says a lot about what we have going on here. We've also added a lot of police officers and firefighters. I want to tell you a couple things about my positions if they don't come up later on. I'm very much opposed to having a city administrator. I'm for term limits. I support our police officers and the rule of law. I'm pro-infrastructure, especially roads. I'm not anti-growth. We're still catching up from previous years of overdevelopment, and we have got to catch up, especially when it comes to roads. I want to finish the Sanders Ferry Greenway, and I very much appreciate our teachers and principals for what they do and the benefits they provide to our kids and to us as a community. And I want to protect our families and seniors from future tax increases. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Payne, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Grady. And Norma, thank you and the League of Women Voters for your making tonight possible, as well as all the work that you do to encourage public service and create voter access. I moved to Hendersonville in 1976. And I'm a great-grandmother, and my husband and I attend community church. I want to tell you that I have received the endorsements from both the Hendersonville Firefighters Association and the Fraternal Order of Police, and I think that speaks volumes about the confidence in my leadership moving forward here in this city. My qualifications to become mayor include 45 years of leadership and management experience in roles including Assistant Vice President at National Life, Vice President of Development at Volunteer State Community College, Business Development Officer at Sumner Bank and Trust, and my latest role was President and CEO of the Hendersonville Area Chamber of Commerce. Through that time, my public record reflects building successful organizations from the ground up to hundreds of employees, raising millions of dollars for Volunteer State Community College, as well as numerous nonprofits here in the Sumner County area, bringing new jobs to the area and new businesses, and supporting existing business. My entire professional and volunteer life has been about connecting people, building relationships, planning, and leading. I want to improve communication at all levels, move our economic prosperity forward, and support and strengthen the services for our most vulnerable populations, which are seniors, youth, and special needs folks. I'd be honored to have your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Payne, you will get the first question. This question will go to both of you, but Ms. Payne, you get it first. Sure. What is your understanding of the mayor's responsibilities with the addition of the city administrator position? And are you anticipating a full-time or part-time position going forward?
Well, I'd start that out by saying that I think it's still a full-time position. The city administrator is going to act as basically a chief operating officer, and as mayor, I will continue to have constant contact with the city administrator on issues that are going on, as well as with department heads. But there are higher level work that needs to be done, and that is where I'll spend most of my time with the city administrator in place. And that means strategic planning, which hasn't been done in a long time. That means branding our city. That means recruiting new business to our area. That means working with the regional organizations so that we can be at the table and really make sure that our what our vision is identified and is a part of that discussion. So those are all things that are higher level activities that a mayor needs to be doing. And so I've said all along that I can do both sides of this, but that's what's in place right now. And so when I get there, I think we need to take a look at that possibility, honor what the independent committee did, and take a look with the new seated board as to what they would like to see happen as well. So we need to review that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clary, same question. What is your understanding of the mayor's responsibilities with the addition of the city administrator's position, and are you anticipating a full-time or part-time position going forward?
I sort of have the benefit that I've been doing that for 3 years as full-time mayor and serving as a supervisor for all our employees, as well as the past year, past 9 months or so, working with the city administrator. It's got to be a full-time job. And I can say that because even though we've had a city administrator for almost a year, it's been a full-time job. I still spend an awful lot of time signing contracts and looking over those contracts and signing about $1 million of checks every week. It's very important that we understand that in other places where they have cut some of the responsibilities, and that we've heard some people cite those other places, that all those mayors have said it is not a part-time job, even though they have a city administrator or a city manager. I do believe that the mayor needs to set a vision, but I also feel like it's sort of pointless for the mayor to have a vision if the mayor doesn't also have the opportunity to implement that vision. I've heard from a lot of folks in Hendersonville that say that they really feel like their opportunity to contribute to that vision, has been removed, that they no longer have the opportunity to vote for the person that is going to have a vision for the city and to implement that. And I think that's a shame, as well as the fact that we're spending $200,000 on a position that a lot of people feel that they should have had the opportunity to vote on, and that took away their opportunity to have influence on who runs the city. To put that in perspective, that's $200,000 that could otherwise go to hire 3 police officers, repave miles of roads, add to our parks, or help with our schools. And it's also about accountability, is that a mayor, full-time or part-time, is still accountable to the voters of Hendersonville. And that's what people have told me that they expect, is that they want the person who's running the city to be accountable to the voters. And to me, it comes down to, and this might be a question that comes up later on, that this election is a referendum, and that it needs to be a full-time mayor, and needs to be a person that runs the city. The mayor needs to be that person. Very simply, if you don't want a city administrator, vote for the candidates who don't want a city administrator, and that's me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clary, you get the first pass at question 2. The city's website at hvilletn.org uses the phrase, "The city by the lake, a place to live, work, and play," to describe Hendersonville. What do you see as the most promising opportunities for Hendersonville's residents in these 3 areas? What is your vision for the city?
Certainly, when it comes down to living, I've got to praise our schools and our parks. That's been hugely important. Certainly, secondary to that is our churches and our other opportunities here. It's very important to me that we are an attractive community, and we remain an attractive community, and it's somewhere that folks want to live, and they want to, as I mentioned, want to see my kids come back here at some time. When it comes to work, I'm very proud of some of the things that the staff has done, especially Rod Kirk, our Economic Development Assistant. We've seen 400 new jobs come to Hendersonville from our top 20 employers in the past 4 years. We've seen him help generate more than $400,000 in state and federal grants for our businesses here. That helps them hire people. That helps them train people and keep them here. And as I mentioned earlier, $130 million in investment from businesses. To me, those two are sort of combined. They'll live and work. That if we have more people that are working here, they're going to spend more time living here as well. Less time living on I-65, less time living on Vietnam Veterans Boulevard. That if we can have more jobs for the people who live here, we just have a much better community. And in terms of play, it sort of fits that way also, as if we have more parents that are working here, they get more time to play with their kids. I used to be on the board of Hendersonville Soccer League, and one of the things we had a hard time was we had a hard time finding coaches because so many parents were spending time in Nashville and commuting back and forth. Having more jobs here, having more opportunities to work here, gives them the opportunity to play with their kids and play with their families, as well as enjoy their neighbors and enjoy other folks that live nearby them. And so all of those very much are tied together. And all of them very much rely on our ability to improve the economy here and bring more jobs here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Payne, same question. The city's website at hvilletn.org uses the phrase, "The city by the lake, a place to live, work, and play," to describe Hendersonville. What do you see as the most promising opportunities for Hendersonville's residents in these 3 areas? What is your vision for the city?
Well, that's an incredible question, Grady. Thank you very much. Hendersonville is a wonderful city, and we have so many wonderful assets here to work and make them better. So what I would say is that there are three things that I've talked about all through the campaign. One is that we need to improve the communication at all levels, improve the communication with our Board of Mayor and Aldermen so that we can be respectful and civil during meetings and outside of meetings and actually get the business of the city done. We need to improve the communication in the region and be sure that we're at the table and taking advantage of all those things. Improve the communication to our residents, the opportunity for us to have a more seamless communication stream to our residents so that people know what's going on. And then communication with our own employee base so that they understand more and have the tools of customer service and the concept there and how their work intersects with each other. I also talk about bringing jobs, and bringing jobs has more to do with not just bringing new corporate jobs, but also infill redevelopment so that the west side of town and all the way down to the lake, and we take advantage of that asset so that we can keep people here. We can have more entertainment opportunities and more restaurants and those kinds of things so that people don't have to go to Nashville for those kinds of things. And then a third thing that I talk about is strengthening the community fabric here. We have incredible families in our city, but we also have needs. And so I want to bring folks together who are already working on the issues that are facing seniors and youth and special needs and have them understand what it is they're doing already and how they can fill the gaps together so that we make us that same hometown feel.
Thank you. Ms. Payne?
Yes.
You get the first pass at question 3. City governing requires much cooperation between elected officials. What is your leadership style, and how would you apply this to working with BOMA and city personnel?
Thank you. My leadership style has always been consensus building. It's always been about understanding that you have to have honesty and integrity so that people can trust you. And that's how I will work with the aldermen on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We've got to have an opportunity that allows us to respect each other so that we can have civil discussion. We may not agree on all of the issues, certainly, but when at the end of the day we can go away from there and have dinner together and get the business of the city done in a reasonable way. So consensus building is what I've always done. The second thing I've always done is this. I really think it's important to bring all of the information together that you need in order to evaluate what's there. If you make too quick a decision about something, then you haven't gathered what you need. And so getting all of the facts and figures together before you make that decision and trying to make it as fair a decision for all of the people in the city as you possibly can. You're never going to please everybody all of the time, but we need to run this city in an organized and respectful and civil way, and so that's how I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clary, same question. City governing requires much cooperation between elected officials. What is your leadership style, and how would you apply this to working with BOMA and city personnel?
I appreciate that very much, Grady. I sort of look at that as two different questions. One is working with other elected officials, not just BOMA, but also some of the folks that help us with those decisions, state legislators, as well as some folks at the state offices. To me, consensus is very important, as well as transparency in making sure that that people have the opportunity to receive information. One of the things that was very important to me very early on when I came on board here was that when one alderman asked me a question, I made sure to give all of them the answers. I didn't feel like it was fair to withhold some information from people, especially if it was information that at least one of them felt was worthwhile. I sent an awful lot of emails, provided an awful lot of updates to our board as well as to the staff, and that's something I've continued to do because it was something that had been missing when I came out here. But something else that had been missing when I came on here, and this is sort of the second part of that, is that our senior staff hadn't had evaluations in a long time. And not only is that important is from the terms of what my expectations are of them, but it's also important because the opportunity to praise those employees is that they hadn't had that in several years, and they hadn't been told that they had done a good job here, or they haven't been told that this is something that the leadership felt they needed to work on. Something that I implemented when I came on, and certainly did a wonderful job for many of our employees here. It helped us in many ways, not just the staff, but going back to sort of the first part of that question, helped us in many ways to function very well in terms of what the board was able to accomplish. And that comes down to, we passed a new zoning ordinance, and some people look and see some of the disagreements we have here, but the new zoning ordinance passed unanimously. We also, like I mentioned, addressed many flooding problems. We rebuilt the fire hall. We've added several police officers and firefighters. We've increased spending on roads. But something also that we came together and worked in a consensus on was having our license plate recognition cameras installed. Nobody had done that nearby, and it was a little bit of a haul to get the whole board to agree to that. But just recently, just last week, we used those LPR cameras, and we identified a violent sex offender that we arrested.
Thank you. Along those lines, Mr. Clary, the Sunshine Law is designed to prevent public policy and public business being conducted in private by two or more members of a governing body who have the authority to make a decision on behalf of the public. How do you interpret this, and how will you honor this rule?
It's been that's been talked about, and it's very important to me when I came on that we had a workshop, and part of that workshop was dedicated to Sunshine Law. We had several new folks and had some older folks that needed a refresher, so we included that in part of our workshop to understand what was expected of the Sunshine Law, because it's very important to me. First off, it's state law, and it can have a huge impact if we don't do it correctly. We certainly have evidence that we have some violations of that from some of our aldermen, and that's disappointing. We've seen some emails, we've seen some text messages that violated that. It's okay for aldermen to get together and to have chats, but it's not okay to conduct business, to conduct legislation outside of the public realm, and that's disappointing. I've been ridiculed for following the Sunshine Law, and I've been criticized because I won't sit down with people for lunch or for coffee to talk about future legislation. I'm not going to do that. Certainly there are disadvantages to adhering to the Sunshine Law, and it's been apparent at times, but it's the law that we have, and it's the law and the expectations that we have in Tennessee and in Hendersonville, and I'm going to continue to adhere to that. It just comes down to a very simple understanding, is that residents should witness the board's deliberations and the board's decisions, and that is something that I am going to follow, and it's something that I'm going to stick up for.
Thank you. Ms. Payne, same question. The Sunshine Law is designed to prevent public policy and public business being conducted in private by two or more members of a governing body who have the authority to make a decision on behalf of the public. How do you interpret this, and how will you honor this rule?
Well, I certainly agree that backroom deals and talking and making legislation out of the public eye is not an appropriate thing to do. I'm a law and order kind of person, certainly. Adhering to the current Sunshine Law is something that I will always do. I want to have a much better understanding of exactly what that means. I do think that people just bringing information together is not a violation of that, but I don't think that you should be in the midst of making decisions at all about what that vote ought to be and those kinds of things, because transparency is, in fact, incredibly important to me. I want this office to have the highest standards of openness and transparency in all of its deliberations, and I want this city to have that so that our residents can always believe that what is happening here at BOMA is in their best interests and not in someone else's best interests. So adhering to the Sunshine Law is certainly what I will do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Payne, this question relates to the current situation with Durham Farms. How can the city hold a developer to the initial plan or commitment they make relative to a development, even if a change is allowable under the existing zoning?
Well, I'm aware that there are some changes there in Durham Farms about having rental properties down there that were not expected at all. And I am against that sort of change in a development. When you come into a community and you imply that they're all going to be owner-occupied, and then there's basically a bait-and-switch kind of situation, then I think that that is just a terrible circumstance for our residents down there. I would investigate through whatever legal options we as a city might have to impose restrictions on that. I don't know what those legal restrictions might be at this point, but I certainly would take them to the full extent of the law. The reality is we as a city need to hold developers accountable for doing what they said they were going to do when they came to us. We need to give them the high standards that we expect, and we need to hold them to that. And they need to do what they said they were going to do. And we need to do what we said we're going to do, and that is hold them accountable.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clary, same question relating to the current situation with Durham Farms. How can the city hold a developer to the initial plan or commitment they make relative to a development, even if a change is allowable under the existing zoning?
I appreciate that, Grady. I'm very much opposed to this change as well. I feel like it was essentially a bait and switch to the city and to the residents there. This was allowed when it was rezoned, I want to say 2007, and I think later confirmed in 2013. And we've made some changes since then because of situations like this. Certainly what we need to do in the very short term is any more requests from this developer or the builders in there, we need to absolutely scrutinize every bit of it. We need to be very cautious about how we move and move very slowly to any requests they have from the city. Any changes that they want to make to the development plan, I think the answer, it starts out as no. And we start from there. It's disappointing what they've done to the residents out there, and I understand that some of the residents sort of want to move forward because they don't want to give themselves a black eye, and we certainly understand that. We need to continue to listen to residents and make sure that they can be our eyes and ears on the ground, that the development plan is adhered to in the future. The whole way we found out about this was from listening to residents. They provided some information to the city that was very helpful. We need to continue doing that. But in the future, something that we've done since I became mayor was when we hear obligations from folks that want to develop property, when we hear them state something at the podium, we put it in writing. And one of those things is how many rental units will be there. We've done that since I've been mayor on at least two projects, and it's something we're going to continue to do. Because had these folks done that back in 2007 or 2013, we would not be in this situation. Very often you hear folks that come up here and want a rezoning or have an application for houses that they say that these are going to be owner-occupied. So in the past couple ones that have come up here, while I've been mayor, we've held them to that. And we've restricted how much, we've had deed restrictions, what the percentage is that can be sold to one owner, and we're going to hold them to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's continue along this vein of development. Mr. Clary, what are your priorities for development as we go forward?
I look at sort of two differences here. One is business development. I am all out on business development. Want to see us develop jobs here, want to see us develop a better tax base here, and I am full throttle on that. When it comes to residential development, we have thousands of undeveloped residential lots right now, which is one of the reasons that I sought impact fees last year. When we have developers that want to further subdivide and apply for a greater number of houses and a greater density, we have the opportunity to impose some fees on them. But these undeveloped residential lots right now, we don't have that opportunity, and we're missing out on a great opportunity for revenue that will help us provide for the infrastructure that's going to be taxed because of this undeveloped property that could have houses on it. We need to understand that a new house, when somebody moves in that house, the city provides services to the tune of about $900 per person. That person typically provides about $500 in city revenue. That's in sales tax and that's in property tax. So we have a $400 deficit. So my priority is looking for ways that we can reduce that deficit as well as to not incur it anymore. We in the city of Hendersonville are still paying for that deficit from years ago and overdevelopment from years ago. We don't want to continue that problem. We need to pay attention to the overdevelopment that's happening now. We need to stop it. Because the impact we're having on undeveloped property, residential property, is having a significant and detrimental impact on the city, especially when it comes to schools. You've heard me talk about this before. We have first and second graders that are going to lunch at 10:30 because their school cafeteria can't accommodate lunches for everybody that's there. And we have teachers that are being expected to do more, and quite frankly, we have students that are getting less instructional time because of the overdevelopment we have in residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Payne, same question. What are your priorities for development as we go forward?
Well, my priorities certainly are to bring business here to this city and to bring high-paying jobs to this city so that the commercial tax base can take on the biggest load for the property taxes that we need. I understand that growth is a difficult situation, but the reality is growth is inevitable in the city. We need to manage growth, and what we need to do is require that the infrastructure that is necessary for any development that we decide to approve is done either ahead of or alongside the development itself. So I think we can manage that growth in a way that does not impact our city or our schools, as long as we are balancing it with the job growth that we ought to have. And that job growth will support the things that we as a city want to have, like additional parks and programs and sidewalks and paving our roads and picking up our garbage and doing all of those kinds of things. But I also want to make a comment about the number of people who have come here who have been kind of relegated to just a dollar and cents sort of equation. The fact of the matter is the people who have moved here have many talents and skills. They have lots of resources. What they bring to this city is not just what they're paying in taxes. What they bring to this city is their ability to be a part of our churches, to be a part of our school programs, to be a part of our sports programs and all of those kinds of things, because that's an intrinsic value that just does not, you can't put a dollar value on that. And so we need to make sure that we understand that that's a transformational sort of value to the city, not just a transactional one.
Okay, thank you. Well, speaking of services, let's talk trash. Ms. Payne, we'll begin with you. What is your plan to improve services, garbage services, in Hendersonville? Some have said that there has been a tax increase for small businesses related to garbage service. Help us understand this.
Well, I was really disappointed when the city changed the garbage contract from twice a week to once a week pickup. And I was particularly disappointed when we changed it from a fee-for-service to rolling it into the tax base, because what that did was it increased the taxes for businesses exponentially and provided a tax increase for a service that they were not going to get because they do their own garbage pickup. So we're charging them for something that they don't even get the service. So I was opposed to the way that happened. What has happened with that is with the new contract, the new vendor is not doing all the things that the previous vendor did, and I recognize that yard waste is going into our landfills, or not into our landfill, it's being recycled, and I think that's a great thing, but because they're not picking that up and because they're not picking up a lot of other things that the previous vendor did, our Public Works is having to come back and backfill that, which is causing us to spend more money through the city that is really under the table and not accounted for. So I'm not really sure that we've really saved as much money as we think we have. I can also tell you there are a lot of people in this city who are not happy about not having twice a week pickup. So I think we need to come back and take a look at the opportunity to either renegotiate that contract or reduce the number of years to it so that we can go back to something that allows us to come back to a different contract in less time.
Thank you. Mr. Clary, same question. What is your plan to improve garbage service in Hendersonville? Some have said that there has been a tax increase for small businesses related to garbage service. Help us to understand this.
I'm going to answer that second part first. There has been a tax increase on businesses, and it's very unfair. We used to have a separate assessment for residential trash use, and it was quite simple. People who got trash service from the city of Hendersonville for their residences, they paid for it. If you didn't get trash service, you didn't pay for it. I was very much opposed to that change last year that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen made. It's just quite unfair. I called several businesses and let them know about that, and I stood up for those businesses because it was quite unfair. We need to be a city that is attractive to businesses, and that change made us a little bit less attractive. It's important to me to stand up for those businesses so they understand how important they play a role here, especially when it comes to sales tax and the property tax they pay here. One of the things that did happen with that change is we are doing more recycling. We're doing more recycling per household than we ever have. What used to go to landfill, a lot of the yard waste is now being recycled, and certainly appreciate what Jason DiStefano is doing at Green Village and some of the other recyclers, businesses that help here. Very, very, very happy with what they're doing here. But I need to step back sort of a little bit to how we got to this point. And really how we got to this point was a lot of consensus building. Seeing that our garbage contract with Republic Services was expiring in June of 2019, before that, in March, I contacted Republic and asked them if they would be interested in extending that contract, and they said no. So then I went to the Public Works Committee and got their input on that, and they said we need to go out for bids. And so the staff went out for bids, and then I sought the input of all the aldermen. And overwhelmingly, all the aldermen, taking a poll from them, said that they wanted to cut service and that they wanted to keep the back door but cut it to once a week. So a couple months later, probably a couple weeks later actually, we brought that in front of the board, and the board chose that type of service. Where we are now is we have a contract that can't just be renegotiated or canceled. It has to be implemented. It has to be enforced. If we want Waste Pro to renegotiate, what we've got to do is we've got to enforce what we have. We can enforce the penalty, and that's $50, and we need to do that for each house that's missed.
Okay, thank you. Along these lines of budgets and contracts, Mr. Clary, what efficiencies in operations could you suggest for budgetary purposes?
For budgetary purposes, one of the things that we've done is we've got a lot more online right now. So at the end of the fiscal year, we're able to wrap up and to get long-term numbers that we weren't able to do too long ago. We also have some greater improvements from the state that they provided us by getting us some of the revenue a little bit ahead of time. That's certainly been helpful. In the 3 years that I provided budgets, we had budgets of more than $50 million, and it's a chore to get all those together. It very much is, and it's worked well that we've had 2 workshops typically with those, and bring all the department heads in to explain those. That's not terribly efficient, though. It really, really isn't, and sometimes that causes problems. We have this year a budget, not one that I presented. We have a budget this year that has a deficit to it. We have some folks that say that is a balanced budget. A budget that spends more than it brings in is not a balanced budget. So I completely agree with sort of the preface of your question, and that is that we need greater efficiencies when it comes to budgets. I appreciate very much the work that our finance department does, especially when it comes to the efficiencies that they've created there, especially when it comes to clocking in and clocking out and getting so much of what used to be a paper process now an online process. And I want to continue doing that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Payne, same question. What efficiencies in operations could you suggest for budgetary purposes?
Well, I think one of the things that any large organization needs to do is assure that it is reviewing its processes and workflows on a regular basis, because there's a lot of efficiencies that can be held to account as you're looking through those, because what happens in those circumstances is you find things that you don't have to do or you can make more efficient. So I think that's one of the things we need to do. Technology is another piece that we need to take a look at to see if there's opportunities for us as a city to save money through additional technologies. I think the kind of bidding process that we currently have is fairly piecemeal. And so us taking a look at how we're bidding things like our telephone services, like our vehicle purchases, like our software and hardware and those kinds of things. So I would want to take a look at all of those sorts of things to make sure that we are handling all of our processes in the most efficient way possible, so that we can save money on that budget process on an annual basis. I would want us to have a balanced budget every year. Deficit budgets are not something that I think we as a city want to do. I also would say that I think it's important for us as a city to reserve funds on an annual basis. The opportunity for us to save a little, my handling of my own personal business is I pay for what I need first, I save, and then I spend on things that I want. And so we as a city need to make sure we have some rainy day fund for times like 2008 and what may be ahead of us with COVID.
Okay, thank you. Both of you have mentioned transparency. That has come up in both of your answers tonight. So, Ms. Payne, the League of Women Voters supports transparency in government, openness, honesty, and accountability. What will you do to promote communication between citizens and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen?
That's a great question. One of the things that I was engaged in about 3 years ago was a visioning process where we actually engaged the community for ideas about what the citizenry was interested in for us to have as a future, what we wanted to look like. But I would be engaging citizens on a regular basis through meeting with them and with their HOAs, having opportunities for people to come and meet with me at City Hall. So I have always had an open door policy, and I am more than willing to listen to the issues that people have here in the city and bring those then to bear on BOMA as well as our department heads as to changes that might need to be made. The transparency part has all to do with not doing business behind closed doors. It has all to do with doing business right across this room on a regular basis every 2 weeks when we meet. You'll never hear me say something different to one person than I say to somebody else, and I think that's a big part of transparency. We need to make sure that we're open and honest with everybody we talk to, and that those are things that I would want to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clary, same question. The League of Women Voters supports transparency in government, openness, honesty, and accountability. What will you do to promote communication between citizens and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen?
I'll continue to stand up for the Sunshine Law, and that's something I mentioned earlier that sometimes I've been criticized for, but it's very important that we make sure that our decisions are transparent, are available for the public to see. But it's also, I'll continue to stand up for our open records law, as we have a lot of open records requests, and what it comes down to is, yes, sometimes we can complain about those, but they're not our records. Those are records that are owned by the public. It's something we should need to provide, and we need to do it swiftly, and we need to do it enthusiastically. And that's something that I'll continue to insist on. Since I've been mayor, we put more information online. We've also have our meetings on YouTube, and we have more information going out by Facebook. And I'm very, very proud and plan to certainly continue to that. I've lost count. We're in the neighborhood of 3,000, maybe 3,200 emails from residents over the past 4 years. And some of those emails I don't count because those are emails that basically go like this: I appreciate your email, I will get back to you. Because a lot of the questions I get asked are not simple questions. It's important to me that even if I don't like the answers, or it's something that I'm afraid that the recipient may not like the answer, or it's something that takes some time, I get them the answer. And I'll continue to do that and be as transparent as possible on those. But it's also about holding community meetings. We've had a couple of those. We had a community meeting the first year that I came in to talk about city finances, and we had several people over at Hendersonville High School. I actually think the League of Women Voters was involved in that, and I appreciate the help that the League did with that. It was enlightening to a lot of folks because very often we hear from folks that have a priority, have a project for the city, and they don't understand, why can't we pay for it? And I hear that sometimes with recycling as well. Why can't we pay for it? And to provide that information and that transparency to a lot of folks helped an awful lot. But it's also, we had recently a community meeting on recycling, specifically that. And that was eye-opening to a lot of people to see the changes that have happened in the industry worldwide in the past 2 years. So we'll continue to do those if I'm elected mayor to make sure that people have the opportunity to come forward and ask questions.
Thank you. This will be the final question before your closing comments. Mr. Clary, we'll start with you. What do you wish had been asked during this forum, and how would you respond?
I one of the things that comes up, and I get asked quite often, is why do I want to run for mayor, and sort of what is it that I want to accomplish? And I think that's sort of the what is your vision for the city of Hendersonville, and I like talking about that. I'm a data-driven guy, so my vision sometimes can be a little bit more like accounting than more like dreaming. But we're in the situation that we have to consider the cost. And so when I think of the vision, I very much have to think of what our needs are, not necessarily our wants. And sometimes I sound like a broken record, and I talk about better roads, is that we really have to maintain what we have. I mentioned impact fees and seeking those last year, and that failed. So we don't have the opportunity to really sometimes look at some of the amenities that are part of what really is a long-term vision. And we have to look more at what is a need and what is a better investment. But roads are certainly a need, and they're high priority for me. But I also want to make sure that people don't have to suffer from flooding in the future. Those are life-changing events. Also would like to see that the natural criminals get the message, that they quit coming to Hendersonville. And the message is that our police officers are going to catch you, they're going to prosecute you, and they're going to put you in jail. And that's something a message that I'd like to get out as part of my vision for Hendersonville. But it's also that I'd like our seniors to stay here. I talked to a gentleman last year, who's about 80 years old, after the board passed a tax increase. I opposed that tax increase. But the gentleman said he was afraid that he was going to outlive his assets, or he was going to have to move outside of Hendersonville. This is a senior citizen. He was very in tune with what his assets were. And that's troubling for me to hear from somebody like that. Also, when I think of my vision, I think of finishing Sanders Ferry Greenway, and I'd love to see all of our schools rated a 10 by greatschools.org. I hear from a lot of folks that move in here that that's part of the reason they moved in here, is they researched our schools. And I'd like to see more jobs here. I'd like to see more jobs for the people who live here, specifically so our families and our residents can spend more time in Hendersonville. So I guess the question I wish we would have asked was more about my vision. So I appreciate you following up.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Payne, same question. What do you wish had been asked during this forum, and how would you respond?
Well, I would have to say that I really would like to have been asked, what is it I can bring to the table? What are the visions that you have, and what are the skills that you have that can make those come true? And so I would tell you that my entire life has been built around leading organizations, planning, developing visions, developing strategic plans, teamwork, communicating with people, having respect for folks, making sure that people are mentored in a way that allows them to be the best that they possibly can be throughout their service with the organization. I want us to focus on the future because I want us to be a better Hendersonville. We're a great city now. We can be even better than we are today. I wanted to focus on my involvement in the past with numbers of other things that really just demonstrate the kinds of things that I have been able to do. I love this city. I moved here 44 years ago. I raised my daughter here. I want this city to be the same hometown feel, that same opportunity for people to feel like they can be safe here. I am so totally supportive of our public safety. They are job one for me. And so my vision is to make sure that we always support and provide the funding for whatever they need to allow us as a community to be safe. So creating a better image for the city so that we can bring business here, allowing the aesthetics of the city and just mowing the grass and making sure that all that stuff is done, and providing the right kind of customer service for our residents and our business people and new business that's coming in. So those are things that I think are really important, and people just want to feel like they're wanted.
Okay, thank you. You each have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Since I began with Mr. Clary, I will begin with Ms. Payne. What is your closing statement for tonight?
Thank you, Grady. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters and you again tonight for your assistance and the hard work in bringing this to the citizens of Hendersonville. I'm honored again to receive the endorsements from both the Hendersonville Firefighters Association and the Fraternal Order of Police, which I think speaks volumes about their level of confidence in my leadership. My goal is to bring competent, common sense, and caring servant leadership to the office of mayor. As I have been talking to people all over this city, what I hear from them is that they're hungry for honest and respectful and visionary leadership. They're also hungry for someone who will listen to all of the people. They want someone who is willing to bring people around the table to solve the problems that we have here currently, but also to have an aspirational sort of feel to our city so that we know that we can go further and be better in the future. I can and will bring my business experience, my leadership, my integrity, and my relationship building to bear as an investment on our prosperity. I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions, and I'm not afraid to make the hard decisions. I want to make our city a better place. I want people in 4 years to say, wow, they've got something going on up there. I want to serve you. You will never call my office and hear me say, it is not my job. It will always be my job. I want to be your mayor. My name is Brenda Payne, and I would be honored to have your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clary, 2 minutes.
And thank you so much, Grady. Again, thank you for League of Women Voters. Y'all continue to do this, and this is probably your 200th forum in the past 50-something years. Actually, that might be a low number. It might be more than that. I appreciate your questions, too. Almost done. And certainly want to talk a little bit more about my accomplishments that came early, but I'll probably skip those and just encourage people to look at claryformayor.com with some of the accomplishments that we have there. But I want to mention a little bit more about my background. I've got a degree in government, and I wrote the book on Hendersonville. I wrote the book, History of Hendersonville, the City by the Lake. It took me about 6.5 years to finish, and that has provided just a wonderful guide and educational experience for what Hendersonville is. I also worked in not only city government, but state and federal government, and it helped me understand what their responsibilities are and their restrictions are, and helped me understand the partnerships that they provide. Most of my work, though, in my lifetime has been in private business. The 10 years before I was mayor, I was helping businesses that needed to expand and bring jobs to local communities, just like Hendersonville. Worked in 23 states and 2 other countries. And saw what worked in some communities and saw what didn't work in communities, but certainly saw what businesses were looking for. I was a planning commissioner for 6 years. I was an alderman for 4 years, and like I said, I've been mayor. I've been in this position for 4 years, and I bring that up because being mayor is not an entry-level position when you get involved in city government. There should be some qualifications there. There should be some expectations that the mayor, the person running for mayor, has some experience in local government. I've created 3 budgets over $50 million while I've been mayor, and I supervised 360 employees during that time. But probably more importantly, I've preserved Hendersonville. We all see how Davidson County is encroaching this direction. I brought it up a little bit when we talked about some of the thugs that come from Nashville. It's very important to me that we continue to differentiate what is Hendersonville and preserve that. And I bring up all these qualifications because, without a doubt, the best qualification for this job is to have done this job well. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating in our forums tonight, and also to all the participants in the Alderman forums. Unfortunately, we had 2 Alderman candidates, Jim Waters and Karen Dixon, who were unable to attend. As a reminder, all the forums will be available on the League of Women Voters Facebook page, as well as Community Channel 3. We'll be posting them. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone to get out and vote.